The acid rain fell like liquid fire across the dying mining colony on Kepler 442b. Each drop sizzled against the rusted metal structures, eating through what little remained of humanity's abandoned dream. The locals called this place the Weeping World, and Jake Matthews understood why. Everything here seemed to be crying, the corroded buildings, the skeletal remains of transport ships, even the sky itself. Jake pulled his jacket tighter and checked his respirator one more time. The storm was getting worse, which meant he had maybe an hour before the salvage became worthless scrap. He traveled 3 weeks to get here, spent his last credits on fuel, all for the chance to pull some working parts from the derelict freighters scattered across the landing pad. Parts he could sell. Parts that would keep him fed for another month. His boots splashed through puddles that steamed and bubbled. He'd learned the hard way not to let that stuff touch bare skin. The first ship he approached was a total loss, its hull already half dissolved. The second looked more promising. Jake was reaching for his plasma cutter when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong to wind or rain or dying machinery. A cry. High-pitched, warbling, desperate. The kind of sound that transcended language and species, that spoke of pain and terror in a way every living thing understood. Jake froze, listening. There it was again, coming from somewhere near the old alien transport ship at the far end of the pad. He should ignore it. He should focus on the salvage. Whatever was making that noise wasn't his problem. But his feet were already moving. He found the source huddled beneath a sheet of corroded plating that looked ready to collapse any second. At first, he thought it was some kind of animal. Then he saw the 3 eyes. The delicate scales. The 4 stubby limbs that would one day grow into arms. A VRYNN hatchling. Jake had seen plenty of VRYNN in his years working the outer colonies. Proud, territorial, convinced they were better than every other species in known space. Their scales usually shimmered with colors that could blind you if the light hit right, greens and golds and purples that shifted like oil on water. This one was white. Pure, ghostly white. The hatchling stared at him with those 3 eyes, and Jake saw something he'd never seen in an adult VRYNN: fear. Raw, unfiltered terror. The little creature was no bigger than a house cat, covered in burns where the rain had touched its delicate skin. It made that crying sound again, weaker now, like it was running out of strength. Jake's mind raced. The VRYNN never abandoned their young. Never. They were obsessive about their offspring, protecting them with a ferocity that had started 2 wars. Which meant this hatchling wasn't lost. It had been left here on purpose. He looked at those white scales again and understood. Albino. A genetic abnormality. In a species that prized perfection and purity above all else, this little creature was considered defective. Flawed. Not worth saving. They brought it here to die. The rain intensified, drops hitting Jake's visor like bullets. The metal overhang groaned, sagging lower. Maybe another minute before it came down completely. The hatchling tried to press itself further back against the ship's hull, but there was nowhere to go. It looked at Jake again, and this time the fear in those eyes was mixed with something else. Hope. Jake thought about his salvage run. About the credits he needed. About the fact that harboring a VRYNN, even a baby one, could bring a world of trouble down on his head. The VRYNN took what they considered their property seriously, and their enforcers didn't ask polite questions. But he also thought about what it meant to look at a suffering creature and walk away. To let someone die alone and terrified because helping them was inconvenient. Because it wasn't your problem. Because they were different. He'd seen too much of that already in his 42 years. Seen it on Earth before he left. Seen it on colony worlds where people turned their backs on anyone who didn't look right, talk right, believe right. Seen it in the cold mathematics of corporate decisions that valued profit over people. He'd promised himself he wouldn't become that. Wouldn't let the universe grind away the part of him that still gave a damn. The overhang groaned again. Jake moved. He pulled the thermal blanket from his pack and lunged forward, scooping the hatchling up just as the metal sheet crashed down behind them. The creature struggled for a second, surprisingly strong for something so small, then went still when it felt the warmth of the blanket. Maybe it was too exhausted to fight. Maybe it understood, on some level, that this weird alien was trying to help. Jake held the bundle against his chest and ran through the rain, back toward his workshop on the colony's edge. His salvage forgotten. His careful plans abandoned. All for a creature whose own people had decided it wasn't worth saving. The hatchling made a soft sound against his chest. Not crying anymore. Something quieter. Almost peaceful. Yeah, I know, Jake muttered, dodging around a pile of corroded debris. I'm probably crazy too. But crazy or not, he wasn't leaving anyone to die alone in the rain. Not today. Not ever. Jake's workshop was nothing fancy, just a converted storage module with enough shielding to keep the acid rain from eating through the walls. But it was warm, dry, and had a workbench with good lighting. Right now, that was all that mattered. He laid the hatchling down carefully under his diagnostic lamp and got his first real look at the damage. Chemical burns covered about a third of the little creature's body, angry red patches where the rain had eaten through the protective scales. Not fatal, thank God, but painful. The hatchling watched him with those 3 eyes, tracking every movement as Jake grabbed his medical kit. "Okay, little guy," Jake said softly, pulling out a bottle of neutralizing solution. "This is gonna sting, but I promise it'll help." He had no idea if the creature understood him. Probably not. But tone mattered, and he kept his voice low and calm as he started cleaning the wounds. The hatchling flinched at the first touch, letting out a sharp chirp, but didn't try to run. It just watched him, those alien eyes somehow conveying trust that Jake wasn't sure he deserved. "You're tougher than you look," he murmured, working carefully around the worst burns. "That's good. You're gonna need that." His AI assistant Vera chimed from the wall speaker. "Jake, we need to discuss the implications of harboring a VRYNN. The diplomatic ramifications alone." "Later," Jake cut her off. "Right now I've got a patient." He finished cleaning the burns and applied regenerative gel, the good stuff he usually saved for his own emergencies. The hatchling made another sound, softer this time, almost questioning. Its body relaxed slightly under the warmth of the lamp. Jake pulled up a stool and just watched for a while. The creature was actually kind of beautiful in a strange way. Those white scales had an almost translucent quality, catching the light differently than normal VRYNN coloring. And those eyes, there was intelligence there. Real, unmistakable intelligence. "Your people are idiots," Jake said quietly. "Throwing away something like you just because you don't look like them." The hatchling tilted its head, and Jake could have sworn it was listening. Over the next 2 weeks, Jake settled into a routine he never expected. Every morning he'd check the hatchling's wounds, healing nicely, barely visible now. He'd set out food, a mix of protein paste and mineral supplements that Vera had identified as safe for VRYNN biology. And slowly, carefully, he'd try to interact. The creature was shy at first, keeping to corners and watching from a distance. But curiosity won out. By day 3, it was following Jake around the workshop. By day 5, it was sitting on the workbench while he repaired equipment, making soft chittering sounds that almost felt like conversation. Jake started calling it Ghost, partly for the white scales, partly because the little thing moved so quietly he'd often turn around to find it right behind him. "You're gonna give me a heart attack one of these days," Jake said after nearly stepping on Ghost for the 3rd time. The hatchling made a sound that could have been VRYNN laughter. What really surprised Jake was how fast Ghost learned. Not just learned, understood. When Jake was working on a plasma regulator, Ghost would watch intently, those 3 eyes narrowing in concentration. The next day, when Jake reached for a specific tool, Ghost had already picked it up in its small claws and was offering it to him. "How did you know I needed that?" Jake asked, genuinely amazed. Ghost chirped and tilted its head toward the regulator, then back to Jake, as if saying the answer was obvious. By the end of week 2, they developed a system. Jake would explain what he was doing as he worked, not because he expected Ghost to understand, but because talking helped him think. But Ghost seemed to absorb every word, every concept. When Jake set up puzzles and sorting tasks as enrichment, the kind of thing you'd give a smart pet, Ghost solved them in minutes. "You're not just smart," Jake said one evening, watching Ghost organize tools by function without being asked. "You're brilliant. And your people just threw you away like garbage." Ghost looked up at him, and something passed between them. An understanding. Maybe Ghost didn't know all the words yet, but it knew rejection. Knew abandonment. Knew what it felt like to be deemed worthless. Jake reached out slowly and scratched the ridge behind Ghost's head, in a spot he'd learned the hatchling liked. Ghost leaned into the touch, making a contented humming sound. "Well, you're not worthless," Jake said firmly. "You're family now. Got it?" That night changed everything. Jake woke to alarms screaming through the workshop. His heart hammered as he rolled out of bed and ran to the window. 3 ships sat on the landing pad, their engines glowing that distinctive blue-white that marked VRYNN military craft. Hunter-class vessels. Fast, deadly, and absolutely not supposed to be this deep in human-controlled space. Ghost appeared at his side, pressing against his leg. The hatchling was trembling, scales somehow paler than usual. It made a sound Jake had only heard once before, that same terrified cry from the day they met. Jake's hand went to his emergency beacon on the wall. One press and he could call for human military backup. The VRYNN were violating 3 different treaties just by being here. He could turn this into an interstellar incident, bring down enough firepower to send them running. But that would mean questions. Investigations. Authorities who'd look at Ghost and see a political bargaining chip, not a frightened kid who'd finally found safety. Ghost looked up at him with those 3 trusting eyes, and Jake felt something fierce settle in his chest. This wasn't just some alien he'd rescued anymore. This was Ghost. His ghost. The little genius who brought him tools and solved puzzles and hummed contentedly when Jake scratched behind its head ridges. Family. Hide, Jake whispered, guiding Ghost toward the shielded compartment under his workbench. Stay quiet and stay hidden. No matter what you hear, don't come out until I say so. Ghost chirped softly, questioning. I'll handle this, Jake promised. Trust me. He watched Ghost disappear into the compartment, then sealed it shut. The footsteps outside were getting closer. Heavy boots on metal. Multiple individuals. Jake took a deep breath, checked his translator implant, and walked to his door. His hand rested casually near his plasma cutter, and his face showed nothing but the mild annoyance of a mechanic interrupted during his evening. When he opened the door, 3 VRYNN soldiers stood behind their diplomat, weapons ready. The diplomat itself was impressive, scales shimmering with rank patterns that marked it as someone important. Jake Matthews, it said, the translator rendering its words in flat, emotionless English. You harbor VRYNN genetic property. Surrender it immediately. Jake leaned against the door frame like he had all the time in the world. Evening to you too. And you are? The diplomatic posturing had begun. But Jake knew one thing for certain, whatever happened next, Ghost wasn't going back to the people who'd left it to die. Not while Jake Matthews was still breathing. The VRYNN diplomat standing at Jake's door was everything he'd expected and worse. Tall, imposing, with 4 arms that moved with unsettling precision. Its scales rippled in patterns that probably meant something important in VRYNN culture. The 3 soldiers behind it kept their weapons lowered but ready, their eyes scanning Jake's workshop like they were already planning the assault. Jake forced himself to stay relaxed, even though his heart was hammering against his ribs. Years of working sketchy salvage jobs had taught him one valuable lesson: never let them see you sweat. Jake Matthews, the diplomat repeated, its voice carrying that weird mechanical quality the translators always gave alien speech. You harbor VRYNN genetic property. We have biorhythm scanners. We know the aberration is here. Surrender it immediately. Jake raised an eyebrow. Aberration? That's a hell of a word choice. I thought you VRYNN were all about respecting life and honor and all that philosophical stuff you're always going on about. The diplomat's scales shifted to a darker pattern. Irritation, maybe. Or anger. Jake had never been great at reading VRYNN body language. We value proper life, it said coldly. Genetic deviations weaken the species. The albino should have been terminated while still in the egg. That it survived hatching was an oversight. An oversight we are here to correct. Something icy settled in Jake's gut. He'd suspected, of course. You don't abandon a baby in acid rain unless you want it dead. But hearing it said so casually, like they were talking about disposing of defective machinery instead of a living, thinking creature, it made his blood boil. You came all this way, Jake said slowly, to kill a baby because it's the wrong color? It is not a child. It is damaged genetic material. Its existence is an insult to VRYNN purity standards. The diplomat gestured with one of its 4 arms. Now step aside, human. This does not concern you. Actually, Jake said, straightening up and letting his casual demeanor drop, I'm pretty sure it does. See, you're standing on human-claimed territory right now. And I'm guessing your government didn't exactly authorize this little death squad you've got going. The soldiers shifted, hands tightening on their weapons. The diplomat's scales flashed a pattern Jake definitely recognized as anger. Choose your next words carefully, human. Or what? Jake felt the reckless energy rising in his chest, the same feeling that had gotten him into trouble more times than he could count. You'll shoot me? On a human colony world? With 3 Hunter-class ships that aren't supposed to be within 50 light-years of this sector? Yeah, that'll go over real well with both our governments. He took a step forward, forcing the diplomat to either back up or stand its ground. It stood its ground, but Jake caught the uncertainty in its posture. Here's what I think happened, Jake continued. Someone high up in your command structure got embarrassed that a white hatchling made it to birth. Bad for the genetic purity propaganda, right? So they sent you out here quietly to clean up the mess. No official records, no authorization, just a quick trip to dispose of the evidence and get back before anyone notices. The diplomat's silence told Jake everything he needed to know. He'd hit the mark. So here's the problem, Jake said. If you were official, you'd have shown up with a whole fleet and proper diplomatic channels. But you didn't. You snuck in here hoping to grab one defective baby and disappear. Which means if this turns into a shooting match, you're the ones who'll have to explain to your superiors why you started an interstellar incident over something you claim is just damaged property. One of the soldiers spoke in rapid VRYNN, too fast for Jake's translator to catch. The diplomat raised a hand, silencing it. You would risk conflict over this, the diplomat asked. Over genetic refuse that means nothing to you? Means nothing? Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me tell you something about humans. We're not like you. We don't throw away our people because they are different. We don't decide someone's value based on how they look or whether they fit some perfect genetic template. Your species is known for its brutality, the diplomat countered. For its wars and genocides. Do not lecture us on morality. You're right, Jake admitted. We've done terrible things. We've got a history we're not proud of. But you know what? We learned from it. We grew. We got better. And one of the things we learned is that the people who obsess over purity and perfection, who decide some lives matter less than others, those people are always the villains of the story. The diplomat's scales rippled through several colors. You speak of things you do not understand. I understand plenty. I understand you left a baby to die in acid rain. I understand you're here to finish the job. And I understand that if you think I'm just gonna hand over that hatchling so you can kill it, you don't know humans nearly as well as you think you do. A long silence stretched between them. Jake could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the weight of the plasma cutter on his belt. 3 armed soldiers. A diplomat who probably had authority to order his death. And somewhere behind him, hidden beneath his workbench, a tiny white hatchling who trusted him to keep it safe. The odds weren't great. But Jake had survived worse. Finally, the diplomat spoke again, and this time its voice carried a different tone. Almost calculating. Name your price, human. We know your kind values profit above all else. How much for you to surrender the aberration and forget this encounter? And there it was. The fundamental mistake that powerful species always made when dealing with humans. They looked at Earth's history of capitalism and corporate greed and assumed that was all humans were. Just walking wallets who'd sell anything for the right price. They never understood the stubborn streak. The irrational attachment to lost causes. The tendency to look at impossible odds and respond with a middle finger and a smile. Jake had seen it his whole life. Rescue workers running into burning buildings. Protesters standing in front of tanks. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things not because it made sense, but because it was right. Here's my price, Jake said quietly. You leave. Right now. You don't come back. And you tell whoever sent you that the albino hatchling died in the acid rain before I found it. You tell them the problem solved itself, and there's nothing left to clean up. And if we refuse? Jake's hand dropped to his plasma cutter. Then we find out exactly how much trouble you're willing to cause over one defective baby. And I promise you, I'll make enough noise that both our governments hear about it. Your secret death squad becomes front-page news. Is that really what you want? The diplomat stared at him for a long moment. Jake could practically see it running calculations, weighing options, deciding whether this stubborn human mechanic was worth the risk. You are making a mistake, it said finally. Probably. I make those a lot. Jake smiled grimly. But I sleep better than you will. The diplomat turned sharply and gestured to its soldiers. They retreated to their ships without another word, engines firing up moments later. Jake watched through his window as the 3 Hunter-class vessels lifted off and disappeared into the stormy sky. He waited until they were completely gone, until Vera confirmed no more VRYNN signatures in the area. Only then did he open the compartment under his workbench. Ghost tumbled out, trembling but unharmed. It looked up at Jake with those 3 eyes, and Jake could have sworn he saw something like awe in them. It's okay, Jake said softly, scooping Ghost up and holding it close. They're gone. You're safe. But even as he said it, Jake knew the truth. The VRYNN would be back eventually. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someone would come looking. And when they did, Jake would be ready. 3 days after the VRYNN left, Jake barely slept. Every sound outside made him reach for his plasma cutter. Every shadow on the security monitors made his heart race. He spent his waking hours installing defense systems, reinforcing the workshop shields, and sending encrypted messages to old friends in the Colonial Defense Force. Ghost watched everything with those remarkable 3 eyes, silent and observant. The hatchling had stopped trembling after that first night, but Jake could tell it understood the danger. Sometimes he'd catch Ghost staring at the spot where the VRN diplomat had stood, scales rippling in patterns Jake was learning to read as worry. "Hey," Jake would say during those moments, scratching behind Ghost's head ridge. "We're gonna be fine. I've gotten out of worse situations." That was only partly true, but Ghost seemed to believe him. Or maybe the little creature just trusted him that much. Either way, it helped Jake push down his own fear and focus on the work. On the 4th day, while Jake was calibrating a point defense turret on the workshop roof, something happened that stopped him cold. Ghost spoke. Not in chittering sounds or warbling cries. Not in the complex, musical language of the VRYNN. But in clear, accented English. "Why, save me." Jake nearly dropped the calibration tool. He spun around so fast he almost lost his balance. Ghost sat a few feet away, head tilted in that characteristic way, watching him with an expression that somehow conveyed both curiosity and something deeper. Something almost vulnerable. "What did you just say?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why save me?" Ghost repeated, the words careful and deliberate, like someone testing out a new skill. "Why you, help Ghost." Jake's mind reeled. He'd known Ghost was smart. Brilliant, even. But this was something else entirely. Language acquisition took time. It took study and practice and thousands of repetitions. Ghost had been listening to him for less than a month. "You've been listening to my audio logs," Jake said, still trying to process what was happening. "All those repair notes I record. You've been learning from them." "Learning," Ghost confirmed, and there was pride in that simple word. "Always learning. Words. Meanings. Patterns." The hatchling paused, struggling with the next phrase. But not understanding one thing. "Why you save Ghost?" Jake set down his tools and climbed down from the turret. He sat cross-legged on the roof, bringing himself to Ghost's eye level. The hatchling moved closer, close enough that Jake could see the tiny scales around its eyes, the way they caught the filtered sunlight. "How did you explain humanity's most irrational quality to someone whose species had probably bred compassion out of their genetic code generations ago?" "Because leaving you there would have been wrong," Jake started, searching for the right words. "Because when you see someone suffering and you do nothing about it, you become part of the problem. You become one of the bad guys." Ghost's head tilted further. VRYNN say strength is good. Efficiency is good. Perfection is good. Ghost is none of these things. VRYNN say Ghost is broken. Defective. Not worth resources. The matter-of-fact way Ghost said it made Jake's chest ache. This wasn't self-pity. Ghost was just stating what it had been taught, what it believed about itself. "Your people are wrong," Jake said firmly. "You're not broken. You're not defective. You're just different, and different isn't bad. It's just different." "But humans value profit, yes? Survival? Self-interest." Ghost's vocabulary was growing more complex with each sentence, pulling from everything it had absorbed. "Saving Ghost serves none of these. Saving Ghost brings danger. Brings trouble. VRYNN will return. Jake knows this. So why?" Jake ran a hand through his hair, trying to figure out how to explain something he barely understood himself. "You're right that helping you doesn't make logical sense. It'd be easier to turn you over, or to have left you in the rain. Safer, definitely. Then why not do this?" "Because." Jake paused, really thinking about it. "Because sometimes the only thing that makes existence meaningful is choosing to be kind when you don't have to be. Because we're both just living beings trying to survive in a universe that can be pretty cruel, and the least we can do is make it a little less cruel for each other." Ghost was quiet for a long moment, those 3 eyes studying Jake's face like it was trying to read something written there. "This is why VRYNN fear humans," Ghost said finally, and there was wonder in its voice. "Not because of weapons. Not because of strength. Because of this choosing. This choosing connection over advantage. Choosing kindness over logic." "Maybe," Jake acknowledged. "Or maybe they fear what it means to admit that their perfect system threw away something precious just because it looked different. That they might be wrong about what makes someone valuable." Ghost moved even closer, pressing its small body against Jake's leg like it had done that first night. "Ghost chooses you," it said quietly. As family. As pack? Is this correct word? Family works, Jake said, his throat tight. Ghost chooses you as family. Is this acceptable? In human terms. Jake thought about what this meant. The complications, the dangers, the diplomatic nightmares this would bring. He thought about the VRYNN who might come back. About the authorities who'd want to study Ghost, use it as a political tool. About the life of running and hiding this choice might create. Then he thought about a small white hatchling crying alone in acid rain, convinced it was worthless because someone had taught it to believe that. He thought about the brilliant mind that had learned human language in less than a month, that solved problems and brought him tools and looked at him with absolute trust. He thought about what it meant to be human. Really human. Not the sanitized corporate version or the perfect genetic template version. But the messy, complicated, deeply irrational version that chose love over logic and connection over safety. Yeah, Ghost, Jake said, reaching out to scratch that spot behind the head ridge. In human terms, that's more than acceptable. Your family now. And humans protect their family. No matter what. Ghost made a sound Jake had never heard before. Not a chirp or a warble, but something that sounded almost like a laugh. A happy sound. A sound of relief and joy and belonging. Jake is good human, Ghost said simply. You're not so bad yourself, kid. They sat there on the roof for a while, watching the acid rain clouds gather on the horizon. Somewhere out there, the VRYNN might be planning their next move. Somewhere out there, dangers lurked that Jake couldn't predict or prepare for. But right now, in this moment, a human mechanic and an alien hatchling sat together in comfortable silence. Two beings from different stars who'd found something neither of their species quite understood. A family built not on genetics or logic or advantage, but on the simple, radical choice to care. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Jake. Ghost said after a while. Yeah, buddy? Ghost is hungry. Jake laughed, the tension of the past few days finally breaking. All right. Let's get you some food. Can't have my genius kid running on an empty stomach. As they climbed down from the roof together, Jake realized something. He'd come to this dying colony looking for salvage, for parts, for things to sell. Instead, he'd found something infinitely more valuable. He'd found purpose. He'd found family. And he'd do whatever it took to protect it. The weeks turned into months, and the VRYNN never returned. At first, Jake waited for them every night, sleeping with one eye open and his plasma cutter within arm's reach. But as time passed and the sensors stayed quiet, he began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they'd actually believed his story about Ghost dying in the rain. Or maybe they'd decided one albino hatchling wasn't worth the diplomatic mess it would create. Either way, Jake wasn't complaining. Ghost grew fast. Not in size, the hatchling was still small enough to perch on Jake's workbench, but in every other way that mattered. The burns healed completely, leaving Ghost's white scales pristine and oddly beautiful. But more impressive was the mind developing behind those three curious eyes. By the end of the first month, Ghost was speaking in full sentences. By the second month, it was debating the finer points of plasma engine efficiency with Jake like a seasoned engineer. By the third month, Ghost had started correcting Jake's calibration techniques. You are doing it wrong, Ghost said one afternoon, watching Jake struggle with a particularly stubborn fuel regulator. I've been doing this for 20 years, Jake replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. Yes. Wrong for 20 years. Ghost hopped down from the workbench and pointed at the regulator with one delicate claw. Angle is incorrect. Should be 15 degrees, not 20. Creates friction. Reduces efficiency by 0.3%. Jake stared at the regulator, then at Ghost, then back at the regulator. He adjusted the angle. The component slid into place perfectly, smooth as butter. How did you know that? Ghost's scales rippled in what Jake had learned was the VRYNN equivalent of a shrug. Watched you struggle with same problem last week. Calculated better approach. Is obvious, yes? Yeah, Jake said, laughing despite himself. Obvious. Why didn't I think of that? Because Jake is good mechanic but sometimes stubborn. Like trying to use wrong-sized wrench because it is already in hand. Are you calling me lazy? Not lazy. Efficient with different things. Jake is efficient with kindness. With protecting Ghost. With being good human. Ghost is efficient with calculations. The hatchling tilted its head. Is good team, yes? Jake felt warmth spread through his chest. Yeah, kid. It's a good team. Word about Ghost spread through Jake's network slowly and carefully. He'd reached out to old friends in the Colonial Defense Force, people he trusted, and explained the situation. The response surprised him. Instead of telling him to turn Ghost over to the authorities, they'd spread the word through back channels. The albino hatchling was under human protection now. Anyone who wanted to mess with it would have to go through some very unhappy Marines first. You're lucky you've got friends in high places, his buddy Tyler had told him over an encrypted comm, because what you're doing? It's either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the dumbest. Can't it be both? Jake had asked. With you? Usually is. The real test came when a VRYNN merchant ship stopped at the colony for routine resupply. Jake had debated hiding Ghost, but the hatchling had other ideas. Ghost is not ashamed, it had said firmly. Ghost is different. Not broken. Jake taught this. Time to believe it. So when the VRYNN merchant entered Jake's workshop looking for engine parts, Ghost was sitting right there on the workbench, organizing tools by size and function. The merchant stopped dead, its scales flashing through a dozen colors in rapid succession. Shock. Disgust. Confusion. Then something else, curiosity. An albino, the merchant said in accented English. I thought they were all culled. This one wasn't, Jake said carefully, his hand drifting toward his plasma cutter. The merchant approached slowly, studying Ghost with its 3 eyes. Ghost stared back, unafraid, scales steady and calm. It is working, the merchant asked. Ghost is helping, Ghost corrected, it's English perfect now. And Ghost prefers proper pronouns, thank you. The merchant's scales rippled in what might have been surprise or amusement. It speaks. How unusual. Ghost speaks 3 languages now, Ghost said proudly. English, Trader Pigeon, and learning Mandarin from Jake's audio files. Also can calculate hyperspace trajectories faster than most navigation computers. Is not bad for defective genetic material, yes. The merchant was quiet for a long moment. Then, to Jake's surprise, it made a gesture that looked almost like respect. Perhaps our culling protocols are too harsh, it said quietly. If this is what we discard. It turned to Jake. You have taught it well, human. Ghost taught itself, Jake corrected. I just gave it a safe place to learn. After the merchant left, with its engine parts and a promise to say nothing about what it had seen, Ghost climbed onto Jake's shoulder, a new favorite perch. That was scary, Ghost admitted. You didn't show it. Jake taught Ghost to be brave. To stand proud even when different. Ghost paused. Was good lesson. 6 months after that rainy day, Jake's workshop had become something special. Word had spread among the human colonies about the mechanic who'd taken in a VRYNN hatchling, and people started coming from all over. Some were curious. Some were supportive. A few were openly critical. You're harboring an alien, one visiting miner had said with disgust. They are our enemies. Ghost is a child, Jake had replied calmly. And anyone who thinks children are enemies has bigger problems than I can help with. But most people who met Ghost left with changed minds. Hard to hate something that greeted you cheerfully, asked about your ship's engine troubles, and then proceeded to diagnose the problem faster than any computer. Harder still when that something looked up at you with 3 earnest eyes and asked if you'd like to stay for dinner. Ghost is making human friends, the hatchling observed one evening after a particularly successful day of meeting customers. You are, Jake agreed, working on his own dinner. People like you. People like that Ghost is useful. That Ghost can fix things. No, Jake said firmly, setting down his fork. People like you because you're kind and curious and funny. The engineering genius is just a bonus. Ghost's scales shimmered. Happiness, Jake had learned. Jake is biased. Is family. Must say nice things. I'm saying true things. There's a difference. They fell into comfortable silence, eating their respective meals. Ghost had developed a taste for mineral supplements mixed with protein paste, which it insisted tasted better when slightly warm. Jake had learned not to question it. Jake. Ghost said after a while. Yeah, buddy? If VRYNN come back, what happens? It was a question Jake had been dreading. He set down his fork and looked at Ghost seriously. If they come back, we deal with it. Together. I've got friends now who'll help. The Colonial Defense Force knows about you. Half the mechanics in 3 sectors know about you. You're not alone anymore, Ghost. Neither of us are. But what if they have authority? Legal claim? Then we'll fight it. Get lawyers. Make noise. Turn it into such a public mess that they'll wish they'd never bothered. Jake reached over and scratched behind Ghost's head ridge. I'm not letting anyone take you. Not the VRYNN, not our government, not anybody. Your family. And humans don't give up on family. Ghost leaned into the touch, making that contented humming sound. VRYNN have saying. Blood determines worth. Is important in their culture. Yeah, well, humans have a saying too. Blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. And Ghost? You're the most loyal, brave, brilliant family anyone could ask for. Even though Ghost is different. Especially because you're different. Different is good. Different is what makes you special. Ghost was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, Ghost is lucky to have found Jake in the rain. We both got lucky that day, Jake said softly. Outside, the acid rain continued its endless fall, dissolving the remnants of abandoned dreams and failed colonies. The weeping world kept weeping, indifferent to the lives playing out on its surface. But inside a converted storage module, warm and dry and safe, two beings from different stars had built something neither of their species quite understood. Not a treaty or an alliance or a political arrangement. A home. Jake watched Ghost return to organizing tools, humming a tune it had learned from his music collection. The hatchling's white scales caught the workshop lights, making it seem to glow from within. Beautiful and strange and absolutely perfect exactly as it was. Hey Ghost. Jake said. Yes, Jake? Thank you. For what? For trusting me that day in the rain. For choosing to be family. For being you. Ghost scales rippled through patterns of happiness and affection. Jake is welcome. Is what family does, yes? Choose each other. Trust each other. Protect each other. Yeah, Jake agreed, feeling that warmth in his chest again. That's exactly what family does. And in a cold, often cruel universe, that simple truth, that family was a choice, not a mandate, felt like the most revolutionary thing in the galaxy.